All right, Jordan, and we are ready on eScribe and YouTube. So good to start at 12:55.
Great, thank you. Okay, good afternoon. I'll go ahead and call the Land Use and Planning Committee to order. We continue to meet virtually, and instructions to join the live meeting remain unchanged, but are available at ci.missoula.mt.us/webcasts. If anyone's watching the meeting on MCAT or another streaming service, you can find a link to join the live meeting and to participate at that location. We have, our first item of business, as always, is roll call. Amanda, can you call the roll?
Yes. Anderson. Absent. Becerra.
Present.
Carlino.
Present.
Contos.
Here.
Hess.
Here.
Jones. Absent. Jordan.
Present.
Nugent.
Here.
Savage.
Here.
Cheryl. Absent. Basika.
Present.
And West.
Present.
All right, it does look like you have a quorum.
Okay, thank you. Our next item of business is approval of the minutes from February 9th. Are there any changes to those? Mike?
I don't have a change to the minutes. My screen still says we're in a practice session. Does that matter?
Oh, I see that. Yep.
That should be fixed now.
Thanks for pointing that out, Mike. Okay, and I'm going to give a moment for folks to filter in on the attendee list. Okay, so we have a number of people joining the meeting as members of the public, and I wanted to note we just started the meeting and had an issue where members of the public were not permitted to join. So I'm glad to see everyone filtering in, and we'll get started. Amanda, could you put the public comment slide back up, please?
Yep, give me 1 second.
Okay. So we have a lot of new faces, it looks like, in our attendee list, and so anyone who's watching this meeting on YouTube or on MCAT can find a link to join the live meeting at ci.missoula.mt.us/webcasts. And then anyone who's in the Zoom meeting now can indicate if you'd like to provide public comment when we get to that phase by using the hand raise feature in Zoom. Anyone, it doesn't look like we have any phone participants, but if anyone does dial in by phone, you can press *9 to raise your hand. I do have a hand raise, and this is Joe Beck, and you should be able to make a general public comment now. If you want to provide comment on one of the items later on in the agenda, we'll take that up after we have the staff presentation. But you should be able to unmute yourself now.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we got a little bit of an echo, but we can hear you.
Okay. Can you just give me like 5 minutes? I didn't think you'd have people speaking this early.
Sure. Are you wanting to comment on the Riverview subdivision?
Yes.
Oh, okay. So this is just general public comment right now on items not on the agenda. So we'll come back to that a little bit later on in the meeting.
Okay, I appreciate it.
Okay, great. Thanks. Okay, so we can move on to we have one item of committee business. This is the Riverview subdivision and rezoning at 1923 River Road. We have Alex Item here to present the item and the staff report. Just for benefit of the new members of council and the members of the public that are here, this is not, there will not be any council action on this today. This is just a pre-public hearing item. And so we'll be just listening to the staff report, asking questions, listening to public comment. So this is an opportunity to provide feedback, and but you won't be hearing staff, or you won't be hearing council making any expressions of support or opposition today, because this is just an informational gathering session. So this will be back for a public hearing, I believe on March 14th. And at that time, council will deliberate and express opinions and make a decision. So I'll turn it over to Alex for the staff report.
Hey, Jordan, real quick, I hate to backtrack, but did we all approve the minutes, or? I know
I'm
that's
sorry, we did not.
That's where it got a little crazy. So I just wanted to clarify if we can approve those minutes or not.
Okay, so without objection, the minutes will be approved. And for the record, Gwen Jones has joined us as well.
Perfect. Thank you.
Okay. Great. Thanks. Alex?
Thank you. Alrighty. So real quick, just audio visual check. Do you see this presentation and can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Perfect. Great. Well, thank you very much. My name is Alex Item. I'm a planner with the Community Planning, Development, and Innovation Department at the City of Missoula. And we're here this afternoon to review a request submitted by Joe Dennert with IMEG on behalf of the property owners for a 19-lot major subdivision and rezoning from RT10 residential to RT 5.4 residential at the address located of 1923 River Road. So the property is located on River Road, which as you can see is south of the Clark Fork River and between Reserve and Russell Street. It is part of City's Ward 6 and within the River Road Neighborhood Council. Here's the existing conditions exhibit. And so as we can see, there is one detached house and one detached shed currently existing on the property, both of which are proposed to be removed if this subdivision is approved. And the existing lot is roughly 2.38 acres. And so here's the preliminary plat for this subdivision and rezoning. There are 19 proposed lots, all ranging from about 4,350 square feet to 4,600 square feet. Access to the subdivision will be provided from River Road and Road A. Improvements to River Road along the street frontage adjacent to the parcel are proposed. Road A is a new proposed low-density local residential street public right-of-way that would provide access from River Road to all 19 lots within the subdivision. The applicant requests 4 variances as a part of this project. One is for right-of-way width and street specifications on Road A. One is for cul-de-sac and turnaround streets. One is for the block length, and the last is for right-of-way width on River Road. Now I'll just discuss the compliance with subdivision review criteria, which addresses compliance with zoning and the growth policy and the impacts of the subdivision on agriculture, water user facilities, local services, the natural environment, wildlife and wildlife habitat, and public health and safety. So here is the our Missoula land use designation from the growth policy. The parcel is within this yellow area, and that's the residential medium density land use designation, which emphasizes 3 to 11 dwelling units per acre. This land use designation is intended to fit within many established residential neighborhoods. It acknowledges single dwelling residential building types as primary use with potential for accessory dwelling units. And the current relatable zoning districts for this land use designation is RT10, R8, R 5.4 and RT 5.4, all of which are residential zoning districts. To touch on kind of a little bit further for the growth policy, there is housing policy goals. And some of those are equity and land use by ensuring that every neighborhood in Missoula participates in addressing the city's housing needs, and housing affordability connected to the ability to achieve more compact development patterns. So here we have for the zoning, the current zoning is this kind of gray area, and it's the RT 10 residential 2-unit townhouse zoning district. So the general area that this is in is this RT 10. There's a little darker gray area here, and that's existing RT 5.4 zoning. And then south of the subject property is RM 2.7 residential zoning district as well. The RT 10 zoning district requires a minimum parcel size of 10,000 square feet, and 10,000 square feet is required per unit for single purpose residential and mixed use. Subject property being around 2.37 acres would currently allow 10 dwelling units at the density of 4 dwelling units per acre. And so for the proposed zoning, the subject property is requesting RT 5.4 residential, and that's the same 2-unit townhouse, which permits detached houses, lot line houses, 2-unit townhouses, 2-unit houses, and multi-mixed use building residential uses. The RT 5.4 zoning district requires a minimum parcel size of 5,400 square feet, and 5,400 square feet is required per unit for single purpose residential and mixed use. However, the minimum parcel area requirement does not apply to lots created through subdivision approved under Part 5 and Part 6 of state law after May 6, 2019. So, which based upon the, which would be the case if this subdivision is approved. Instead, the total unit is calculated based upon the gross parcel area divided by the minimum parcel area per unit. So in this case, the subject property is again 2.37 acres, which would allow 19 dwelling units at a density of 8 dwelling units per acre. So the next criteria to address for the subdivision review is agriculture. The Natural Resources Conservation Services soil survey for Missoula County states the subject property is 100% identified as 114 urban land, which is not prime farmland if irrigated, or land of agricultural importance. So there will be no impact to agriculturally important soils as a result of this subdivision. And the next criteria, also shown on this slide, is for the water user facilities. And as you can see, there is on the south side of the property, so here's River Road, which will be north and south side. There's an irrigation ditch that is off-site and is about 20 feet away from the subject property. When originally reviewing the application under section K1C4 of the application, it states the property is not served by an existing developed irrigation system or water rights. However, on February 10th, Development Risk Services received public comment from the president of Orchard Homes Irrigation Ditch Company, informing us the subject property is located within Orchard Homes Irrigation District and is subject to water rights as outlined in the title report, section B3. So in cases such as this, the city subdivision regulations require that potential lot buyers be notified that the lots are classified as irrigated land and may continue to be assessed for irrigation water delivery, even though the water may not be deliverable to the lots. So staff has recommended 2 added conditions as shown here, 18 and 19, to address this requirement. And that was reflected in memorandum number 1 dated February 11th that we sent out. So with these added conditions, staff can make the finding that no important or no impacts to agriculture water users or water user facilities are foreseen as a result of the subdivision if the recommended conditions of approval are imposed. Next, I'll cover the impacts of the subdivision on local services, which include the following provisions. So to kind of recap for this subdivision, it will be served by city water and sewer services. Republic Services will be the solid waste disposal company taking care of this area. Parks and Recreation confirmed that parkland through cash donation in lieu of dedication is allowed, and that's due to the proximity of LaFrey Park just directly adjacent to the west of the subject property. Based on correspondence with the local school districts, there will be no adverse impacts to schools with the increased density this subdivision, if approved, would provide. And the subdivision would be provided by city fire and police departments. One of the conditions from fire was the installation of a new fire hydrant, and that is on the end of Road A, which I'll go over a little bit later. The final component here is the transportation element, and that's where a lot of the variances kick in, so we'll go over those in more detail right now. So here is for the variance number 1 related to Road A, and this image, just for the sake of blowing it up, kind of excludes River Road and the turnaround. So, but for clarity, River Road is on the left side and that's north, and this is the turnaround at the end. So we're just going to focus on Road A though real quick. So the applicant shall provide a street naming exhibit prior to final plat. So it's currently Road A, and that will be changed as part of the conditions. But currently Road A is functionally classified as a low density local residential street. All 19 lots within the subdivision will have access to Road A, which connects to River Road right away on the northern side of the subject property. So the first variance is from 3 standards for Road A. The subdivision regulations for low density local residential streets require a minimum 40-foot wide right-of-way and 33-foot wide street, including 2 10-foot wide travel lanes, 2 6-foot wide parking lanes with curb and gutter, plus 7-foot wide boulevards and 2 5-foot wide sidewalks. The other component from the city subdivision regulations says that the public streets and road right-of-way must meet the standards in Table 2A, which is also what they are varying from, they're requesting. And then the other section in city subdivision regulations states a parking lane is required on both sides of local residential streets and cul-de-sacs. So those are the 3 main standards that the applicant's requesting to vary from. And so specifically, the applicant is requesting the regulations and is proposing a 29.5-foot wide right-of-way with a 25.5-foot wide street width and 1 parking lane for Road A. Applicant's proposing 2 20-foot wide sidewalk and utility easements alongside and adjacent to the east and west sides of Road A, which would include on both sides a 7-foot wide boulevard, a 5-foot wide sidewalk, and 8-foot wide utility easement. So section 30203B of the city subdivision regulation states all streets within a subdivision must be dedicated public right-of-way or at the engineer's discretion may be a private street and public access with private maintenance easements. So Road A is a combination of dedicated right-of-way and easements. These easements are designed to contribute to the functionality of the 29.5-foot wide right-of-way and 25.5-foot wide street, while also maintaining the allowed density for the subdivision. Staff recommends conditions of approval stating the applicant shall show all dedicated public right-of-way for Road A on the face of the plot. The applicant shall show all proposed sidewalks, utility easements on the face of the plot with identifying their width and purpose. According to City of Missoula Fire Marshal Dax Frazier, the International Fire Code requires 20 feet of unobstructed driving surface for city fire to provide life and safety and fire protection services. So parking only allowed on one side of the street if the variance for an area of street section is approved would be okay. Staff recommends a condition of approval that requires no parking signs posted along the entire eastern side of Road A to help meet this requirement. And so just so you can see here, this is the west side of Road A, and that's where the parking will be. And so on the east side, there will be no dedicated parking area. And lastly, the applicant's proposing shared driveways, which as we can see are these little concrete areas here for each different lot. And addition to that, there will be no access strips in various locations along Road A. So I've identified in this blue area as best as I can is these are going to be no access strips, essentially limiting. So the driveways have to be in these areas and there can't be curb cuts and other locations along Road A. And here is Road A again. It's just a cross section if we need to refer back to it. So here again, we have the 25.5-foot right of way. We have our 2 10-foot travel lanes. There's a 7-foot parking. There's no parking on the eastern side. There's room for curb and gutter. And then on either sides within the easement is where the 7-foot boulevard, 5-foot sidewalk, and the 8-foot easements are contained for the whole street section. So the second variance we'll kind of touch on is the turnaround, the hammerhead at the end of Road A. And this is the whole section of that here. So city subdivision regulation states that cul-de-sacs, loops, and circle streets and turnarounds are prohibited. So that's one variance that they are requesting. However, further in the city subdivision regulations, it states if variances are approved for, in this case, a turnaround street, a separate set of 8 standards must be met. And so those 8 standards are listed out here on the screen. The 3 from these additional standards that the applicant is further requesting a variance from are highlighted in red. So specifically, no more than 15% of roadway miles may be used for the turnaround. The minimum right-of-way radius is 50 feet and the minimum pavement width radius is 45 feet. So in looking at the subdivision regulations, these are primarily going to be for your traditional cul-de-sac turnaround, where in this case it is a hammerhead. But the City of Missoula Fire Department did provide us from the International Fire Code Appendix D, this snip here, which is kind of the standard hammerhead of what they use to determine if it's accessible for a fire department and it meets those requirements. The third variance is for block length. So the city subdivision regulation states that blocks may not exceed a maximum length of 480 feet in urban and suburban subdivisions. The applicant is requesting a variance for approximately 534 feet. This property is a narrow, elongated shape at 162 feet wide by 638 feet long and has one legal access from River Road. The unique shape minimizes the road configuration options, while the proposed road configuration optimizes the residential density potential. Granting this variance to block length allows Road A to provide safe and accessible access to all 19 lots in the subdivision. Requiring road connections within the minimum 480-foot block length along Road A would not result in an increase of connectivity, as there are no road connections available on the adjacent properties. The physical surroundings of this parcel are consumed with a built-out residential subdivision, a public park, and the warehouse buildings to the south. And so our final variance is to River Road. And so River Road is functionally classified as an urban collector without parking. It has a 60-foot wide right-of-way currently and provides the only access to the subdivision. The subdivision regulations for urban collector roads without parking require a minimum 80-foot wide right-of-way, including 2 travel lanes, 5-foot wide bike lane, curb and gutter, which equals an approximate 31 feet street width, plus 7-foot wide boulevard, 5-foot sidewalk, and a small amount of additional space for maintenance. Table 2A also includes the possibility of a center turn lane, which may require additional space. Subdivision regulations states subdivisions abutting existing or proposed streets and roads must meet dedication of right-of-way to meet the requirement of 2A, measured from the existing center line and extending along the entire frontage of the proposed subdivision. For River Road, along the subdivision, this would require 40 feet of right-of-way instead of the existing 30 feet. The variance is to waive the requirement for additional right-of-way dedication. The applicant is proposing a 10-foot wide sidewalk and utility easement along the northern portion of Lot 1 and Lot 19, which in addition to the River Road right-of-way would include 7-foot wide boulevard and 5-foot wide sidewalks along the entire frontage of the subdivision adjacent to River Road. The half-street improvements and easements would create sidewalk connectivity along River Road, which would provide additional safe pedestrian access to Skylight Court and River Road School Bus Stop. The applicant shall pay for the costs of half-street improvements to River Road along the entire frontage of the subdivision, subject to the review and approval of the city engineer. And those improvements must be installed or entered into an improvements agreement with financial security for future installation. The City Public Works and Mobility Department staff recommended requiring a waiver of the right to protest the creation of and a participation in a street improvement district or street lighting improvement district for future lighting and other improvements along River Road, which is also recommended by development staff. So for the non-motorized component, there is an existing 20-foot wide conditional public non-access easement on the south portion of Lot 7 and Lot 14 of the Carter Orchard Homes subdivision, and that's directly adjacent to the east of the Riverview subdivision. As of today, there's no trail or sidewalk that's been developed within this non-motorized access easement, but the city subdivision regulations state subdividers must provide active transportation facilities that provide continuous access to all lots within the subdivision and access to adjoining developments unless exempted by these regulations, and B, safe routes to schools, playgrounds, bus stops, and public parks and common areas. So the applicant is proposing a 10-foot wide public non-motorized access easement along the entire southern boundary of lots 9 through 11 to provide a continued connection from the Carter Court Orchard Homes subdivision to LaFrey Park. Some of the final components for the subdivision review criteria that I'll cover is on natural environment, wildlife, and wildlife habitat, and public health and safety. So as you can see here, the proposed subdivision is in an urbanized area and not close to wild lands or public lands. There is no riparian vegetation on the subject property. No adverse impacts to wildlife or natural environment are anticipated. The Montana County Weed Management Act and the Missoula County Weed Management Plan require developers and owners to revegetate with beneficial species at the first opportunity after disturbance of soils. The applicant shall submit a weed management and revegetation plan in compliance with the regulations. This property is outside the FEMA identified 1% annual chance of flood hazard areas and the floodplain, and the property does not contain any areas of slopes of 25% or greater or other apparent hazards. So no adverse impacts to natural environment, wildlife, and wildlife habitat or other public health and safety are foreseen as a result. So there's no, as Jordan mentioned, actual motion happening today, but from planning board and staff's recommendation, there is the recommending the approval for the first variance, all 3 or 4 variances for Road A, the turnaround, the block length, and River Road. And I can go through these later if needed. They're here for reference as well. And the subdivision motion is to approve the River Road subdivision on the preliminary plot application, subject to the recommended conditions of approval based on the findings of fact and conclusions in the staff report, and also as amended in memo number 1 dated February 11th. And the rezoning motion for reference is to approve the adoption of an ordinance to rezone the subject property located at 1923 River Road from RT10 to RT 5.4 based on the findings of fact and conclusions in the staff report. We have received some protest petitions from the neighbors, and so state law says if protest petitions are signed by owners of 25% of lots or units within 150 feet of the property, at least 2/3 of present and voting members of council are needed to approve zone changes. So at this point, we've received 15 valid protest petitions, and that's about 44 to 53%. There's a range there because, well, either way, it's over 25%, but there's some unit clarification we're trying to figure out just north of the subject property. So that might change a little bit, but it is, again, over 25%. So the supermajority is required to approve this request. And then for reference later, I have all the conditions of approval here that I will not run through, but they're here if needed. And so that concludes the presentation.
Thanks, Alex. And I may have missed it, but what was the planning board vote?
The planning board all voted the same as the staff recommendations.
Okay, thanks. So I have a lot of hands up. Typically what I'll do is go to the applicant first and then come and for any presentation from them, and then come back for council questions and comment. So without objection, I'll do that. I don't know if anyone from IMEG wants to present.
They are in the attendees, Jordan. It's they might need to be promoted. Oh, you have them. Okay.
Okay, you should be able to unmute yourself.
Hello, did that promotion work, Jordan? Can everyone hear me?
Yeah, we can.
Thanks for noticing my raised hand throughout that presentation. And Alex, thanks for directing him in the right to the right person. So I'll share my screen here. We do have a presentation today. Can everyone see the presentation? Should be the first slide. It should say Riverview subdivision and rezoning.
Yep, we see it. Thanks.
All right, perfect. Well, Alex always does a phenomenal job. So makes my job pretty easy here. Essentially, my goal in this presentation is to provide you guys with some key takeaways, the intention of the developer, the process leading up to where we are today, and to communicate really the overall spirit of the proposed rezone and subdivision before you. Obviously, everyone in the land use planning committee want to thank you as well, and any members of the public that are here today to voice your opinion. I really appreciate it. Let's make sure I can click through. So like I said, I'm just going to give a brief overview of what brought us here today. Really want to stress the work that's gone into this proposal before going to the planning board meeting in February 15th. That was the pre-application meeting, neighborhood meeting, all the element reviews, and officially going through the governing body submittal by the end of last year. And yeah, just to reiterate, Jordan, we did get the recommendation for approval for all of the recommendations from Alex's staff report. And then obviously here today to provide context and information for any questions that y'all still may have. So like Alex said, the proposed project does align with the land use designation, that residential medium density, 3 to 11 dwelling units per acre. It's pretty common, as you can see from the relatable zoning districts there, that RT10, R8, R5.4, and RT 5.4 zoning districts be allowed for this land use designation. So our proposed rezone does align with some of the relatable zoning districts in this area. And I do want to draw attention to this picture here on the right, which shows our property outlined in the green and black dotted line. So one of the concerns brought up in the planning board meeting was that the proposed rezone for this area really doesn't align with the character or any of the existing zones along River Road. And it is worth pointing out to the Land Use and Planning Committee that there is an RT 5.4 existing zone about 500 feet to the west of the property, as well as that plan unit development for Carter's Orchard Homes. There was a number of public comments raised regarding, some of the variances that we are requesting with the subdivision. And I do think it's worth mentioning that with that plan unit development, Carter Court right now has a 30-foot right of way, which is also less than the requirements, and they have much less than the 20-foot setbacks. So unfortunately, the parcel sizes along River Road are pretty restrictive. So they do dictate some atypical requests whenever you're trying to propose a subdivision or development in this area. Lastly, the city housing policy, as Alex mentioned, does state that housing affordability is connected to the ability to achieve more compact development patterns, which really is one of the driving factors for the developer in this project. This is the existing conditions exhibit that was submitted with our subdivision application. And I just have this slide to stress that this property's location within the city does make it ideal for infill development, which is a step towards accomplishing the city's housing policy goals, while also adhering to the growth policy land use designation and fitting in well with the overall neighborhood character. As Alex mentioned, the proposed subdivision will be served by city water and sewer. It will improve the non-motorized infrastructure along River Road and provide pedestrian access to Lefray Park to the west, while still complying with the required zoning setbacks and providing necessary utility and public access easements. Alex did a phenomenal job going over these variances, so I'm sure that you guys have enough context at this point. Alex, thank you so much for doing that. But I just want to make it clear that this proposed road design came about after collaborating with the developer on what is what was economically feasible, and then also working with the city to make sure that the road provides safe, adequate access for public, and also realizes the intent of the growth policy for the area. So even with the proposed road design that does have a narrower width, both for right-of-way and paved width, the road does provide 16 on-street parking spaces, as well as 2-car garages and 30-foot shared driveways. I do want to draw attention to some of the infrastructure improvement highlights, because I think these are important to remember when talking about this proposed project or this proposed subdivision. First, the half road improvements that Alex was talking about, some of the public concern that's been brought up is facilitating safe pedestrian travel to the bus stops in the area. And although we can't provide sidewalk, curb, and gutter to all of River Road, having half street improvements with sidewalk, boulevard, curb, and gutter along the property frontage will improve pedestrian access in the area. And then also the connection to Lefray Park. It'll not only benefit residents, but it'll also help in the flow of pedestrians using the footbridge that connects to the North Johnson and Idaho streets on the other side of the development to the south. So in closing, once again, Alex, thank you so much for your thorough presentation of all the subdivision requirements. And in the presentation, as well as your approval for recommendations for the variances, rezone, and subdivision. Obviously, I'd like to thank the planning board for their recommendation of approval and the land use and planning committee today for listening to my presentation. Last but not least, I'm sure there's going to be some public comment. I just want to thank anyone from the public that's coming out to voice their opinions. I really appreciate that. I know that Alex and I just covered a lot of information, but I believe the key takeaway here is that the proposed subdivision does align with the city's housing goals and growth policy while still being economically feasible for the developer. Without the proposed rezone to allow for a higher density development and the proposed variances to accommodate a slightly narrower road, the project will, in our opinion, either become unaffordable for future residents or undesirable to developers due to reduced density. So with that, myself, Paul Forsting, and Danny Oberweiser are all on the call today, and we'd be happy to answer any questions that y'all might have. Thank you so much.
Thanks for the presentation. We appreciate it. Okay, so as Alex and I both mentioned, this is a pre-public hearing, so there's no action today. And just for our new members, typically, we don't always do these pre-public hearings, but we do them for larger projects and projects that are of maybe a little bit greater complexity. But since the public hearing hasn't occurred yet, it's most appropriate to not express an opinion, but to just to ask questions and to continue to keep an open mind until we've had the conclusion of the public hearing, which is our official vehicle to gather public comment. So that's just sort of the protocol that we use. But again, happy to take questions and have a discussion. So what I'm going to do is take a round of questions, and then I'll go to public comment, and we can hear from members of the public who are in attendance, and then we'll come back to additional committee questions and discussion, so that we can ask any questions that are raised by that comment. So I have Daniel first, and then Heidi.
Thanks. Yeah, so I was talking to some of the city staff on emails about the variances. And since we're requiring 4 variances, we can also require conditions for those as a city council. Basically, they said that the conditions have to be related to the variances and around a similar financial cost. But I was curious if you all as staff have any examples of possible conditions that we could require along with these variances that would be for the public benefit. So I'm just kind of looking for some examples of conditions that city council could possibly require that help require along with the variances.
So based on currently what we have is the 19 conditions, all ranging from different aspects of the project, and all particularly derived from, the variances that are being requested and other components as well. So that is how we got to the conditions that we did, and I can pull it up and go through them a little bit more. But yes, so, and I don't know if this is answering your question specifically, but we got to the conditions where we are based on the variances requested to feel that they're meeting the standards, if that answers your question.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, Heidi and then Kristen.
Hi, thanks. So I have a couple of questions. And my first question is, if I couldn't tell in the provided drawing, there was actually, it looks like the connection to LaFrey Park just ends at the edge of the property, but doesn't actually connect to any of the infrastructure in the park. Am I understanding that correctly?
That is correct. I don't think there's a trail specifically there. There is one south that connects through from Idaho, but it gets you to the public space of the park, not necessarily directly. I mean, it's grass area, but not directly to the infrastructure.
Did Dave have a specific answer to that question too?
Dave DeGrant Price, City of Missoula Development Services, here in support of Alex. Just wanted to point out that, Alex, maybe could you put up your screen, put up the image showing the road and where it connects down to LaFrey Park at the southern end. So down at the southern end, it's actually southwestern portion, there is a sidewalk that's proposed to continue directly to LaFrey Park. And there's an area, a grassy area that can be used for snow storage in the winter and also would be unobstructed in the summer so that people can walk from the end of the turnaround directly to LaFrey to the west.
Thank you. Jordan, can I have a couple more questions? Is that okay?
Yeah, go ahead, Heidi.
Okay. I guess I'll just comment that I would love to see a connection that actually takes you all the way to the existing path in the park. I don't know if that's possible, just because if you have a stroller or something, I think it can be challenging to get across grass. And then I had a question about that. Actually, the slide is perfect. So at the back end, so I guess the south end of the property, there's the 10-foot public access easement that is going to be required. And I noticed that both, it looks like the adjoining property has a 20-foot access easement. And I was wondering what the long-term plan would be. Yeah, right there. To like potentially make up that difference in width. Would that come in the future from the property that backs up to this property? What's the plan?
Maybe Dave, you have more info. I mean, for the subdivision regulations component of it, if there is existing easements for access, in this case, the public non-motorized access easement, the subdivision regulations require to maintain those and continue those on. So that's where the 10-foot wide access easement came from in terms of why it wasn't 20 versus 10. I'm not sure. I'm not sure about that. Dave, do you know?
Yeah, I have a thought on it. Alex, can you go to a slide that shows an aerial photo of the site? Okay, perfect. So if you look at the subdivision immediately to the north, you'll see that the homes are actually partially located within that 20-foot easement.
Yeah.
And that easement is fenced off immediately to the north, or sorry, to the east of this property. I'm getting my directions mixed up. The subdivision to the north to the east is up on the screen. And so, the Orchard Home subdivision actually has a bit of history, or the Carter Court subdivision has some history. Where that home is, the farthest one to the right on your screen, kind of adjacent to lot 9 here, that was actually, I think that was a park area originally. But it became, through a request to change the plat, that became a home area. And I think in exchange for that, I might not have all my history just right, but that 20-foot easement was required. And so to answer your question, I guess there isn't really a long-range plan to connect these two, but the idea is there is the 20-foot access easement on the property to the north. And so we thought at least providing an opportunity to continue that. If at some point in the future that develops out, we provide a little bit of space for it. So that was the concept.
Okay, thank you. And then my last question is about, I guess I was writing down my other questions when you mentioned the floodplain. And I assume that this is currently outside of the floodplain. And I know that we've been going through a process of remapping the Clark Fork River and remapping our floodplains. And I was just curious if anyone who's currently working on that project has chimed in on the location of this subdivision. And that's my last question.
So we did receive, so currently, yes, it is outside the floodplain and there is a remapping happening. Currently at this point, they're in the pre-draft mapping phases. So we haven't even really seen what that might look like. Originally it was going to come out in January, then it was February, now it's April. So it just takes time to get through it. But ultimately there's even going to be a full review process, which ideally we're trying to get active this summer or late fall to get involved with council. So it's a pre-draft preliminary plan. So we don't have any regulation to base it off of at this point. It's almost too soon. But so we don't know if it will or will not be. We did receive comment that it could be affected, but the certainty of that is not known right now.
Jordan, I do have a follow-up question.
Yeah, go ahead, Heidi.
On that. So if in the future, hypothetically speaking, there is a change to the flood maps, would we be allowed to revise maybe some conditions under like subdivision law? Would we be precluded from, I don't know, for example, like having all mechanical things be 2 feet above flood stage or something like that? Would we be able to come back and revise it?
Well, so from my perspective, depending on, if this subdivision, for example, is approved and say a year from now, we get these maps and we know it's, let's say, in the floodplain, I think at that point, it seems most likely we would address that on a building permit basis and make the floodplain permit involved at that stage if it wasn't built out already. Dave, I don't know if that sounds accurate to you.
Yeah, I agree with that. So if a year from now, it turns out this entire property is within a 100-year floodplain, when people are coming in and asking for building permits, they'll also have to seek a floodplain development permit. And so construction can actually occur within a 100-year floodplain, but there are safeguards that are required. So elevating the structure, for example, elevating mechanical, electrical, plumbing, things like that. And also making sure in some instances that water can flow underneath or through the structure. So things like that. So it would be handled on a kind of permit by permit basis at that time.
Thank you.
Thanks. Kristen next, followed by Mike.
Thank you, Jordan. Yeah, so since this is in my ward, I've received a lot of feedback about it, and I just have a couple questions. One is just to kind of summarize your recommendations, Alex, which is basically that this project is bigger than the area is originally zoned for, but because of some checks and balances, it's going to meet up and fit in with the city's growth policy. So it's a completely legal proposal and subdivision request. Basically just is my first question.
Yes, so with and I can pull them up too. So staff is recommending approval of the variance component, the subdivision, and the 4 variances component, that the rezone, subdivision, and the 4 variances. And so essentially though, based on the findings of fact and conclusions of all that, subject to the conditions of approval. So those 19 conditions, we're saying if those 19 conditions, staff's recommendation, are implemented and imposed, then yes, the subdivision, we would recommend approval and it complies with the regulations.
Thank you for that. I'm sure that sounded a little silly to ask that, but I just wanted to get it out there that this proposal is completely legal, whether or not people are happy with it or not. So thank you for answering that simple question. Jordan, may I ask another question?
Yeah, go ahead.
Another thing I just want to reiterate, Alex, that was an excellent presentation. I feel like I understand so much more about planning than I ever did. But just another question I have to reiterate, because I know there are constituents listening, is that since you said it received a certain amount of protest petitions, that City Council, when we vote on this in a couple of weeks, it's going to take a super majority. What is a super majority? Oh, maybe you don't know that, Alex. I'd like to know what a super majority is.
So it'll need to be and Dave can chime in, but a 2/3 majority vote. So, well, council will first and foremost need a quorum, but then the approval will need to be made by 2/3 of all present members. So it adds a little additional hurdle, if you will, once you receive those greater than 25% protest petitions.
Thank you.
And if I could just
Jordan?
add slight.
Oh.
Do you mind if I just add slightly to that, Counselor?
Go ahead, Dave.
Okay, so the protest provision applies to the zone change. And so it doesn't apply to the subdivision. So when you take a motion, actually, when you move to take action on this, I think the appropriate order is first to do the zone change. That's really the key here, because if the zoning isn't approved, then the subdivision wouldn't comply with the zoning. It kind of goes back to your initial question, Counselor. So that would be the first one. And again, as Alex described, the zone change, because of the protest, because more than 25% of the adjacent property owners have protested, that would require 2/3 affirmative action of the present and voting members.
Great. Thank you.
Thanks. And then it looks like Jim wants to add as well. Jim?
Right. I have one more question, if possible.
Yeah, I think maybe Jim had something on this topic, so I was going to.
Sorry.
go
Yeah,
him and
sorry.
come back.
I think the staff has pretty well touched on it, but that's what there was an opinion a few weeks ago trying to give you an idea of instances where more than a simple majority was required, or else it had to be a majority of the entire body. And so the extraordinary majority means that you're going to need more than a simple majority on the zoning if the zoning protest is adequate. Now that has to assume that they have adequate protest to trigger the extraordinary majority. And I imagine Alex and Dave will be working right up until the final city council decision to see what that percentage is, unless it turns out to be quite a number above the threshold for forcing the extraordinary majority. The extraordinary majority is going to vary from the type of item you're considering. So this one in this case isn't necessarily going to apply for, like, for example, if you were going to dispose of land, it takes a 2/3 vote of the entire city council adopting an ordinance or resolution to dispose of any city-owned property. So you have to take it on a case-by-case basis, but I think Alex and Dave understand it well enough that they'll guide you if it's necessary, if the protest becomes that close.
Thanks, Jim. Kristen, back to you.
Thank you, Jordan. Adding on, I think a little bit to what Daniel was asking, I didn't understand the response and just wanted to expand on that a little bit. When we talk about the types of incentives that we can add to this type of a project, I know a lot of my constituents are super concerned about River Road being completely, it's just an underqualified bit of infrastructure that's going to affect the ability of this subdivision to kind of be peaceful. And I'm just wondering, I guess, if we could talk a little bit more about what types of incentives we can ask for, and can they go further out on River Road at all or not?
I suppose you mean like further out on River Road. Do you are you kind of thinking like additional sidewalk space, or is it kind of?
Yeah.
So in terms of, kind of feedback or ideas on that, I guess from a staff perspective, all of River Road, at least from what I've been able to find with plots, is 60-foot wide. And so what they're requesting to vary from is to not go to 80-foot wide right of way here. River Road is part of a long range transportation plan as a complete streets to be completely relooked at. It's in the long range transportation plan. In terms of timing or design, that's definitely nowhere near. It's probably could be 10, 15 years away. It is on the docket though, and they're talking about it. But essentially the staff or the applicants requesting to not do an 80-foot wide right of way. And so they're just going to stick to that 60 at where it is. And so I guess that's the variance they're requesting. And so for staff to I guess, recommend approval of that. We have implemented that the half street improvements that the applicant would need to pay for on that portion of River Road, as well as the installation of that sidewalk. I guess for ideas of additional, I don't know if that's really within staff's realm. Dave, do you have?
I just want to point something out, and that is, if you have your conditions of approval in front of you, or your recommended conditions of approval in front of you, Alex, maybe you could pull those up. That might be cleanest. And look at condition number 4. And so this is in anticipation of River Road being upgraded at some point in the future. Alex described it as a complete street. That's what our long-range transportation says. And what complete street means is that there would be multimodal transportation. So sidewalks, bike lanes, improved crosswalks, things like that, potentially bus service or transit service. And so number 4 here says that whenever someone buys a lot in this subdivision, they've waived their right to protest the formation of and participation in a special improvement district. And so typically that's how something like that Complete Streets project would be funded, or at least that might be a portion of the funding, is there's a special district that's set up. And so when a district like that is set up, people who are within that district have the right to protest, and there has to be a majority of people who are in favor of it to fund it, essentially, for the district to go forward. But in this case, we've added a condition stating, and this is straight out of our subdivision regulations, that they have to waive their right to protest. So they're automatically yes votes. And so that's, so what we thought at the staff level was, with a condition like this, where their participation is automatic in that district, assuming that that's the funding source that's used, plus the improvements that were already required, so half street improvements, we felt that that was proportionate and sufficient. And if council thinks otherwise, then there may be some other conditions. You mentioned extending sidewalk or contributing to a greater degree. I guess what I would want to do is, if you have those ideas, you might want to consult with the city attorney, because we get into some sticky, there's a lot of case law about things, about they call them exactions or requirements for developments, kind of horse trading, so to speak. And so you just have to be a little careful about it.
Thank you, Jordan.
Thanks, Kristen. Actually, I had a follow-up based on Kristen's questions, and I think maybe Kristen, correct me if I'm wrong on this, but I think maybe there was a component of an off-site improvement as well. Can we require, as a function of this, can we require improvements to River Road? Is that fair?
Yeah, I think that it's going to put a tremendous amount of pressure on River Road, let alone the stress. I don't know. But yeah, River Road has definitely been a hot topic with constituents in the last couple months.
Okay, so yeah,
vision.
Dave or Alex, could you tell us a little bit about what we can and cannot do with regard to offsite improvements?
Alex, would you like me to hit on that a little bit?
Yes, please.
Okay, so under Montana subdivision law, you, the governing body, you do have the right to require the subdivider to extend public improvements, or capital facilities, as they call it, to the subdivision. So you can require, as in a baseline, you can require offsite improvements, but there are a couple of caveats there, and you have to weigh them. And so, and this is based on legal precedent. The improvements that you require have to be related to the variance, related to the issue at hand. So if they're looking, for example, for a road type variances, then what you require ought to be related to the road or transportation system somehow. And then the second, so they call that a nexus, a rational nexus. It has to be related. And then the second part is the improvements that you require have to be proportional. And I know this is it sounds a little bit vague. And so it can be proportional in terms of cost, in terms of intensity, but you have to weigh these two things out if you're going to require additional offsite improvements. But you do have the legal authority to do it. You just have to be careful. And so that, again, that's where I think, Jim Nugent, his office, can be most helpful.
Okay, thanks. Mike, and then Sandra.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I have a couple of questions and a comment. First, Alex, I was hoping that you could just and I apologize if you explained this and I missed it, but just tell us what the density on RT10 is compared to what the density allowable on RT 5.4, or lot size, if that is easier.
Yep. So the density is going to be for an RT10 is 1 unit per 10,000 square feet. So essentially with the current parcel size and the current zoning that is on the property, the RT10 zoning district is 4 dwelling units per acre. So based on this property size, it would allow 10 dwelling units. And then so what's a little bit different with the RT 5.4 is kind of similar, but what I explained and can go further into is that the minimum parcel area requirement does not apply to lots created through subdivision approved under Part 5 and 6 of state law after May 6th. And that would be the case here. And so instead, that unit is calculated based on the gross parcel area. So so in this case, the parcel sizes range from around 4,000-ish to that range. So the minimum parcel size in RT 5.4 is 5,400. So they don't meet that minimum. So the density is based on then the total gross parcel area. So it goes back to that 2.37 acres, which would allow 8 dwelling units per acre. So based on this parcel size, 19 dwelling units.
You had a slide that showed kind of the zonings of the neighboring properties across the street. It looked like there's some RT2. Can you put that back up?
You want the current or proposed?
You had a satellite one, but I guess honestly, this one works right there. Across the street, it's RT10, the residential Brandy edition. How that lot, the density looks to be quite a bit larger than 1,000 square or 10,000 square feet. I'm just trying to get a feel for other parcels in the neighborhood and how they compare to it. But showing the slide might answer my question on that front.
Right, and I don't have a density. I mean, I can go through and do some rough calculations of the Brandy edition across the street. I don't know the unit density right now. It is part of the Brandy edition, so I mean, I can look into that a little bit. But yeah, so Carter Court is somewhat similar, but less density. They have 14 total units here. And then obviously we're requesting 19 here. We have lower or higher density down below. And then this is a kind of trailer park north of it. And then obviously the Brandy edition. So a couple pockets of higher density in the RT10.
Thanks. From the aerial, I was assuming that was a mobile home park across the street. Do you have any idea how many units are in that mobile home park?
There's around 30 or so.
Because that lot looks to be similar sized. Okay, thank you for that. Jordan, I have a few more if that's okay.
Please go ahead. Thanks.
On the conditions, I have 2 questions. So condition 11, the applicant shall submit a boulevard landscaping plan for River Road, subject to city parks and recreation approval. I assume that there's policy, and us new council members just are learning this as we go, but I assume there's a set policy that the Parks Department has to base their boulevard approval on.
So Alex, you're muted.
Thank you. So the Parks and Recreation, I'm not sure their exact standards. They will have to do a full review and approve prior to filing the final plat. But so they do have that 7-foot wide boulevard area in River Road that they will have to do boulevard landscape trees approved by Parks and Recreation Department in whatever spacing that requirement is as well.
But that condition is based on policy, not opinion. I guess what I'm getting at is like that's a predictable condition.
Right. Yes. So then it's a standard condition as well that they would get the Parks Department approval of the landscape boulevard plan. So they do have a plan. Parks Department will implement I don't know their exact regulation name, that designs these landscape areas to the site. Okay.
And then on condition 16, references the Historic Preservation Officer's letter. This parcel this building is not on the historic register, but it's simply triggered because it's 50 years or older.
Correct. Yes. And the Historic Preservation Officer has looked. So there's a couple components in the letter and then in the SHPO letter as well that since it is greater than 50 years, it does have to go through documentation to make sure there is no historical or cultural importance. And so they just have to, I think, this condition is here, but it's almost been actually satisfied. The historic preservation officer has looked, and the only thing they need is some documentation, but the photos have been submitted and everything. And so this condition is actually almost wrapped up.
Okay, I appreciate the additional information, because the question was going to be the same, along the same lines of what is the baseline that the staff member bases their approval on. But I'm satisfied with your answer on that front. And Jordan, I've got one comment, and then I will be done talking. I appreciate the conversation on the questions on conditions and requirements based on variances. I think we need to be careful in those conversations that they are proportional. I know that several council members have had conversations around affordable housing and those types of conditions. And I know that there have been examples such as the condo project over off of 5th Street, where the city gave up some right-of-way space in exchange for affordable housing. So I think that that's an interesting conversation for us to have, but I would just say that we need to make sure those are proportional, because any cost that's added on to a project is going to be divided by the number of lots in there. And we are in a very unaffordable period in housing purchasing in the city of Missoula. So I think that that's something that we need to factor into those conversations as well.
Okay. Thanks, Mike. Sandra?
Thanks. So I live in the area, so I frequent Lefray Park and River Road quite often. So Mike actually asked my question, but so I'm more of a visual learner. So let me get my question part right. So Skylar Court is townhouses. So it's one building divided into two. So two separate people live there. Carter Court is individual single family homes that are just kind of right next to each other. So will this look more similar to Skylar Court or to Carter Court?
So based on the proposed zoning and even the existing RT10 or RT 5.14 townhouses, I don't know if IMEG has additional info on the specific building types they're proposing. Those zoning districts allow for detached houses, lot line houses. You can do a 2-unit house, which, well, no, the density wouldn't allow for that really here, but a 2-unit townhouse. So like you said, attached, they could do detached. So the zoning district itself allows for the unit types. So in terms of specifically what they're proposing, I'm not sure if they're going to be detached houses or townhouses, but the district just allows for those components.
Okay, thank you. And may I have a follow-up?
Yep, go ahead.
A lot of folks in the area are concerned because they have HOAs in the area, and some of the places don't have HOAs. Is there going to be a proposed HOA on this specific development?
There's property covenants that have been in place, and I have not seen documentation or any proposal for an HOA to my knowledge.
Okay, and then one more, Jordan, if that's okay.
I think would the applicant like to add on the HOA question?
Yeah, I didn't want to interrupt the chain of questions though. So if one more question relates to these things, I could provide context.
Oh no,
there
this is
and kind of-
completely separate.
Okay. Yeah. Thanks for your question, Sandra. This is Joe Dennett with IMEG, and unfortunately, a lot's still to be determined right now with the developer. There's a lot of work yet to be done. We're still not through the preliminary decision process with City Council, obviously, but Alex hit the nail on the head. Obviously, we will be zoning compliant depending on what the decisions are, but everything is kind of still in the works right now. And we've talked with the developer about various options, but plans haven't been finalized.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry, I just got an update from another one of my coworkers, and he was saying that he had talked with the developer recently and said that HOA documents are likely going to be part of the common improvements for the covenants in this area.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
And then my final question. So last year I received some complaints. If you're heading north out of Carter Court and you take a left heading west, there's a bunch of people that are parked right there. And I think that's because this lot is kind of vacant with those two houses on there, and they're just using parking for that. So I guess this is more of a comment than a question. I think that this being if this is approved, I think that would alleviate that parking concern. Can you guys repeat where are you guys going to put no parking signs on River Road, or how was that going to work? Like if people got company when they came and visited a friend there?
The parking signs were going to be in relation, or the no parking signs, to Road A. So I can go back to that. Yeah, and that's just mainly because, so part of what is required for a low density local residential street is parking on both sides. And so kind of in lieu of parking, they're only doing parking on the one side. And so the no parking signs will be located on the side that there will not be any parking. And then the no access strips are also utilized to create and maximize the off-street parking, or I'm sorry, the on-street parking spaces.
Okay, thank you. I'm done for now.
Okay, thanks, Sandra. Jim, your hand's up. Do you have anything else to add at this time?
I just forgot to take it down.
Okay, thanks. So next we have Mirta and then Gwen.
Thanks, Jordan, and thank you to everyone for all the info. I have a couple of questions. One, I think is just I want some clarification. The variance request for the River Road right away, are we basically saying that they just want to meet what's currently on River Road, meaning while regulations require 80 feet, what's actually there is 60, so they would just be meeting the what's already there. Is that right?
That's correct. And then they're not going to dedicate additional right of way to meet the 80. They'll just maintain it at 60 and do the half street improvements and then the sidewalk and landscaping.
Okay. My next question is this in the MUTD?
Yes, it is.
Okay. And then my next question is, how much is the expected cash in lieu for this subdivision?
At that point, it's unknown. One of the conditions of approval is that the applicant must obtain an appraisal that's approved by the city to get that estimate. But that will be prior to filing the final plat.
Okay. And then a question about the requested zoning district, RT 5.4. Do you know what the rear setbacks are for that zoning district?
Yeah, the rear setbacks are 20 feet.
Okay, so structures would be required to be 20 feet from those on Carter, correct?
Yes, and here's just a visual. So the little dash line does kind of indicate the setback. So it will be 20 feet from the property line for Carter Court and then the western boundary as well.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you.
What are the rear setbacks on the Carter Court PUD? Do you happen to know?
I've heard 11 feet, but I've not seen a building plan. I think that a public comment has been made about that, though. I think it was 11 feet. I don't have it confirmed.
Okay, thanks. Mirta, do you have additional questions?
No, thank you. Not
Okay,
right now.
thanks. Gwen?
Thanks. I was actually going to ask about the cash in lieu, but I think we've got an answer to that. And the only other comment or information I was going to provide was Mike Nugent had asked about the boulevard landscaping and what framework there is for that from parks. And all I can add is the fact that I know that for boulevard trees for our urban forest, the city has created lists of acceptable trees to go in boulevards that are appropriate for our environment and our climate. And I think they kind of focused on different neighborhoods. And also there's a lot of analysis that goes into, based on the width of the boulevard, what tree roots will work with that. So there is some framework there that the discussion takes place between parks and the developer. So that whatever goes in will work well and hopefully survive and thrive in Missoula.
Thanks, Gwen. Mike?
Thanks, Gwen. I appreciate that extra information, and I completely support that. I just, if we're going to be asked to approve conditions that state staff approval, I want a better understanding of what the staff is basing the approval on and if those policies have come through the city council before. But I'm sure they have, so.
Okay, thanks, Mike. I have a list of questions and nearly all of them have been asked and answered. So I guess that's the benefit of chairing the meeting and waiting until go last. The one question that I do have, and I have not fully reviewed memo number 1, but it came up in a recent land use question up on Expressway that as the city of Missoula has ownership of the municipal water supply and looks to safeguard water rights moving forward. Is it possible to require that water rights associated with this property be conveyed to the city for either to protect in-stream flows or to be converted to a groundwater right? And I don't know if anyone has the answer to that, but have staff looked into that, and is that as a function of the conditions 18 and 19, and is that something that's potentially feasible?
I can address that at least in part, Jordan. And that is, so the way it works, and Alex, correct me if I'm wrong or supplement as you feel appropriate. The way I understand it, the water right is actually not owned by the property owner here. This property is part of an irrigation district, and the district itself owns the water rights. Orchard Homes Irrigation District, I believe it's called. And so I don't know exactly how the function is, but this property has a share of those water rights. It's not ownership share, but it's a kind of a use. And so state subdivision law provides a few options when dealing with a situation like this with water rights. And so we think that the recommendation that was provided in memo number 1 complies with state law and will also hopefully not diminish the ability of the irrigation district to function. That's one of the dangers when you're subdividing irrigated land is the more and more land that's taken out of it, the harder it is, especially if people are not paying into the district, it's harder for the district to function, to maintain the turnouts and head gates and clean out the dishes and all that stuff. So I guess we can look into it a little bit further, but I don't think that they actually own the water rights to convey.
Well, and that's really helpful, Dave. And like I said, I have not reviewed memo number 1 beyond just a cursory look at it. So I'll take a look at that. And if I have additional questions, I'll reach out. We have about 45 minutes left. What I'd like to do is go now to public comment, and I'm sure that we'll have additional questions that are raised as a function of public comment. And then we'll talk about next steps as far as whether or not we need a meeting next week and so on. So if you'd like to make comment, feel free to raise your hand. And I have Carrie with a hand raised, and Carrie, you should be able to unmute yourself.
First of all, I just would thank you so much for your good input and your questions and your concerns about this subdivision. The city council is facing a real tough question here as far as we're concerned in this neighborhood. I think 2 things that really jumped out to me again in this, we've all expressed to various people our concerns about the safety involved. And I think that you really, in order to understand the safety issue, need to take a drive down River Road, especially around this area, and down Curtis, which is a feeder to this, keeping in mind that according to the developers' own statistics, there will be 152 daily trips added with this subdivision on this road that is already narrow and busy. One of my huge concerns is the bus stop for the children. There is about a 50-foot stretch between the end of the developer's lot and the bus stop, and it is totally impassable in the winter. Those kiddos cannot walk anywhere except the highway lane, the road lane, to get to the bus. And if you think that's a safety issue, good for you, because I am terrified every day when I take my dog for a walk and see the kids getting off the bus with no place to walk except the main lanes to get to the trailer court. So that is just an issue that is primary for me. And the other one is the fact that they suggest that we can walk to public transportation. And it is 0.7 miles, but there again, without sidewalk, the snow is piled on the edges or the mud is filling the edges and you're forced into the travel lanes. And River Road is a feeder, it's a busy lane. And so we're having that risk ongoing all the time. So I guess bottom line, please come visit our area and see what we're up against here. And, you know, if you want to drive down Quarter Cart and see a subdivision done right, perhaps a better use of our adjoining land would be another 55 plus community where we are not cramming so many people in and where we can kind of maintain some of the beauty and fill a need in the community for senior housing. So thank you for the opportunity. And I appreciate your concern about this.
Thanks for your comments. And can we just get your name for the record, please, as well?
Carrie, K-A-R-I-E, Shelton.
Yeah. Thank you, Ms. Sheldon. I appreciate the comments.
Thank you.
Would anyone else like to provide comment? Okay, next I have Joe Beck. Ms. Beck, you should be able to, oops, I'm sorry. Yeah, you should. Okay, Ms. Beck, you should be able to unmute now.
Can you hear me?
We can. We've got a little bit of an echo.
I don't understand that because I'm on a computer and no one else is here.
That's a little better. You're a little quiet. Why don't you go ahead and we'll see how it sounds.
Okay. I just want to thank people for all the comments tonight. I am the president of the Homeowners Association for Carter Court. We have 13 houses on this street. I asked, I'm sorry about this echo. Were you all able to read the letter I submitted earlier that encompasses most of our concerns?
Yeah, we did receive that. Thank you.
I just want to make sure everyone did read that. I also would really like to stress again what Carrie said and urge every council member to please come out and look at our proposed area. The private road across the street that encompasses 30 trailers, that has inadequate parking that overflows onto River Road directly across from this proposed Street A in the narrowest part of River Road. This area is so narrow, and you will find, I don't know how to fix this.
You know, and Ms. Beck, if you'd like, we can. I can read off. There's a phone number that you can call in for audio if you want to.
I'll do that.
Okay. If you, Amanda, would you mind putting that slide up so that we can? So there's. Oh, I'm sorry. It's not on there. It's on the. So the phone number, if you're, if you're calling from a, would you call from a cell phone or a landline?
A cell phone.
Okay, so so you could call area code 253 215 8782.
8782.
Yeah, and then it'll prompt you for a meeting ID. And
I've got.
Sorry, what's that?
I have that.
Okay, great. Yep, it's just at the top of the meeting agenda. So you're welcome to call in with that, and I'll recognize you when you call back in.
Give me just a second and I'll pull up the agenda, and that should have all of the information you're looking for.
Thanks. So I'll go to another comment, and then Ms. Beck, you can call in and we'll come back to you.
Okay, I appreciate it.
Okay, thanks. Okay, so I have on the screen it appears as Richard 22, and you should be able to unmute yourself.
Hello. Hi.
Yes, hello.
My name's Evelyn Fazell. Richard 22 is my husband. That's how we logged in, whatever. I assume you can hear me.
Yes, we can.
Okay, I just was aware of this meeting this morning, so I've got about 3 pages of notes, so I'm trying to condense things. And then again, questions with a number of things that came up. And thank you to our elected members who have been engaged with this. And we do invite you to come out and take a look. And when you're here, let us know. We'd be more than happy to talk with you also. And thanks for the planning committee. Being a little bit older, I know I don't hear as quickly as you speak. So just one of the things I want to say, I'm on Carter Court and my backyard is to this development. Obviously, what we want, I believe, is to have a nice River Road community. We would love to have our views, the mountain views, the afternoon sun, and our privacy, but we do realize that building is inevitable. However, it can still be nice and bring quality to this River Road community. If this has to happen, definitely would like for it to be the RT10. We saw that up the road a little bit on River Road 2103, which Joe, I believe, mentioned earlier, it turned into a 5.4, which once again is a whole cluster of homes, putting more on there than what was originally designated as the RT10. They talked about the character of the neighborhood and that it's in compliant with, well, this is an old neighborhood. We have the trailers across the street. If you drive down, you see older houses, and that's fine. I think that's it's what makes River Road in this community eclectic. We don't need to have, well, anyway, we'll just leave that there. One of the things too that I see is that they're using the green space pretty much to be LaFrey Park. And with all the, with this, the number of homes, where are they going to put their basketball courts? I assume this is not going to be a 55+ community. If it is, please let us know. I think we'd be thrilled to have like neighbors. But if it is going to have kiddos and things, not even talking about getting to the school buses, but where are they going to put their basketball courts and things? Where are they going to have fun in their community other than LaFrey Park? It appears the developer is that's the green space being allowed for it. And that also impinges upon those communities that are around LaFrey Park that already use it. And there's a number of us that do. We've gone that way, and the people on the other side. So just taking all that into consideration. The HOA, when we did have the one meeting with IMEG, we talked that we would be more than happy to meet with them. We're not looking to control anything, but we have a nice community here at Carter Court. We wouldn't expect it to be exactly what we have, but we really are in compliance with what we do. We care about each other. So that, when we had the one meeting with them, that's something we'd be happy to sit. We want a nice community. I don't know how else we can put this. Just a couple of questions I have a number of questions with today's, we learn more and more each time. I don't understand where is this right of way that you talk about, the 60 feet versus the 80 feet? Is that right on River Road? I don't know where that is.
Yeah, that's correct. That's on River Road.
What does right of way mean?
So that's the portion of the area that's available for public improvements, like a street or a sidewalk.
So they would veer a little bit off of River Road to turn onto A Street or whatever that is.
So typically a right of way will be wider than the street itself. So the street might be,
Okay.
So there could be sidewalks or additional lanes or whatever other street trees, whatever other types of public improvements within the right of way.
That area. Okay. And just like I say, I have many questions. One of the ones that concerns me a bit is let me see, I'm going to use the fire trucks back in, that Hammerhead area, or even the whole thing. They talk about, when Alex was talking, and I don't remember the name of the organization, but it's either a national or the association of what fire companies, emergency vehicles, whatever it's called, that the developer, whoever, they are in compliance with that. But I didn't hear anything where our local fire people, our local whoever the head of the fire department, or that they go along with this. And I guess one of my concerns with this is many times if a fire truck comes, you may have a police person, or if an ambulance comes, oftentimes a fire truck comes too. So while it may be in accord with a national or association policy, what happens if we do have a fire? Oftentimes it's more than one vehicle. Or if an ambulance comes, I don't know what the requirements are in Missoula County. Other places I've lived, if an ambulance comes, they bring a fire truck too. I'm not sure why, but that's what it is. So that's one of my concerns that was brought up today, is I guess that to make sure that compliance is one thing, but safety is another. And again, I go back to we want a nice community. We want River Road to be, oh, wow, you live in Rattlesnake. Oh, wow, you live in Grant Creek. We want an, oh, wow, you live in River Road. Yeah, let's build it to become that. And yeah, we have trailers here, and that's fine. Not everybody can afford everything. One other thing, and I promise I'll quit at some point. You talk about affordable housing. Is it affordable housing or affordable renting? And that's a concern for many of us. Are people going to buy these homes? And is there already a list of people that are ready to buy them and then just rent them out? It makes a difference in a neighborhood, and I think we all know that. And even if in the HOA, if they could have a high number of homeowners in proportion to the renters, that would be very helpful. So thank you very much. And every one of these meetings, we just learn more and more and more. And I have no background in planning, so thank you for all that you've given us.
Well, thank you for your comments and questions, and we will get answers to those questions, and thanks for attending.
Thank you.
And Ms. Beck, it looks like you're back. Do you want to give that a try?
I'm back. Can you hear me without an echo?
Yes, that's
Okay,
much better.
I learned if I changed one of the settings on my on my Zoom meeting, that made all the difference.
Okay.
I just want to echo what everyone else said that has spoke today. Most of our neighbors were not able to attend this meeting, but like I said, I serve as the HOA president of Carter Court. What we really want to stress and urge every member of the council is just to please come and look at this area. Look at the feeder streets that move from where the street A is proposed, which is directly across from 30 trailers that already has inadequate parking that overflows onto River Road. Like I said, directly across from this development. The area is so narrow, and we have 5 streets feeding into a narrow area of this River Road. I want you to really look at this. The street, there are 30 trailers there, and that means there's probably at least 60 people living in there. Most of those people, oftentimes they're parking right in front of this proposed development. And if they're not, they're overflowing onto our street. There's cramming 19 townhouses onto a street the size of Carter Court just seems so insane to me, because you have parking on one side, and while you have 16 parking spots available, most houses will have at least 2 cars per household. That's 38 right there. I know you have garages, but at the same time, I know what happens when you get people that move into a neighborhood. This is what we all have. We come with our baggage, we come with our trailers, we come with this and that. And I just can't imagine what this street will end up being. On Carter Court, we have parking on both sides, but we have snow removal in the winter And if you have snow on both sides, you can't even get a car down, both two cars down, coming and forward back down the same lane, because and this street will have only parking on one side. The snow removal in our area is really also so difficult because the street plow can only get down to push snow. It can't move it around. It can't take it off of our street. So if you've got people at the end of the T where we have 3 houses proposed, I don't know where they're going to stick that snow. I feel like for the homeowners that are going to buy these houses, that the city owes that to them. And it shouldn't be just throw up some 19 houses in the most space that you can possibly cram in without thinking about the infrastructure, which we already know is going to be 10 to 15 years down the road, or the people that actually live in the neighborhood. Why are we allowing a developer to take away gardens and backyard sun that we all enjoy on this street? It's just such an affront to me. And I think that without coming out and looking and talking to us, and so we can show you these issues, I don't feel like the council is going to give our neighborhood the right due that we are due. Are we going to allow a developer to say they can't build there unless there are 19 buildings? Well, I don't believe that. I don't believe that for 1 minute. And I think that we owe this neighborhood, which has been this neighborhood has been so disjointed in its planning. And if you drive around this neighborhood, you'll find that. And I think it's time we start paying attention to this neighborhood. It's full of middle class and poorer people in a very disjointed area. And why can't we make this neighborhood be what we should be proud of in any neighborhood in this street or in this city? Let's make this be a place where we can be proud of and not just say, oh, well, we have a housing issue in Missoula and we need to have these houses crammed in here because that's all that matters right now. Well, what matters is quality of life, and quality of life on Carter Court is very important to all of our members, including the people on the opposite side and across the street. I really urge you to all come out and look. And I appreciate your taking comments today. We will have more neighbors that will be involved in this at a later date. Thank you.
Okay. I appreciate your comments and thanks for coming today, and thanks for sending your letter as well. And we have Richard Fizel with public comment. You should be able to unmute.
Can you hear me okay now?
Yes, we can.
Okay, very good. Obviously, I'm Evelyn's husband. Just wanted to mention a couple of things that have been addressed, but I want to revisit or probe a little further. At first, it seemed, and still does, somewhat haphazard that if the builder wants a variance, it's quickly approved. Now, I know it's not done without any forethought, and some great homework has been done by you folks. But if a regulation had been in place for years, how can it be overturned very quickly? Well, it's not just quickly, but quickly and in depth. And I'm wondering how carefully that will be done. And I was wondering this especially, and then Mr. Nugent, I believe, addressed that issue and said, well, we can have some trade-offs, if you will. So before a variance is granted, maybe we could demand conditions that would compensate for the loss of of whatever the variance was preventing, and it was allowing. And it seems to me that most of our issues have been related to River Road, and obviously that's not on site, but it is so close that it is it is a major factor in any sort of development. And the question is, yes, we might, when I say we, everyone involved in the planning, might say, yes, we will grant this variance if River Road right-of-way is widened or something like that. That's fine, but who's going to enforce that in the future? That's the kind of thing that an HOA would do, but that the HOA has not factored into things. So what kind of confidence would one have that even if there were an HOA, it wouldn't have the force of law so much? So that's a major question. Who would enforce the variance trade-offs, if we call it that? And one more example of a specific, and this has to do with our equivalent to Road A in Carter Court. When one comes in there are a couple of sharp turns, and about once a year, a truck, either a delivery truck or one providing services or whatever, every year we get a couple of branches lopped off our trees by the trucks. Something that's not major, but is an annoyance worth considering, and just illustrative of the fact that you really may need more right-of-way than is stipulated in laws. And I encourage, as did everybody from Carter Court so far, that you come and look at things. And hey, maybe we could have a group that includes some of us old folks at Carter Court, as well as the builder, as well as the planning folks yourselves. Thanks for listening.
Thanks for your comments. I appreciate that. I want to express that I really appreciate everyone's suggestion that we come on site. I've actually been by there in the last week to check this out and see it on the ground. We do have a legal obligation in Montana to conduct all of our business in a public meeting. And so unfortunately, we're not able to meet with anyone on site just because that eliminates the possibility of the public having the opportunity to observe our deliberations. So it's an invitation that we appreciate, and unfortunately we're just not able to do that with neighbors or with developers or with anyone on any side of a land use issue. And that's just like I said, so that the public has the opportunity to observe and participate in our deliberations, and that's one of the real safeguards of open meetings in the state of Montana. I have Ms. Stanslin Bickers next. And Diane, you should be able to unmute as well.
Hi, I'm Diane Stanslin Bickers, and I've been listening to these conversations, and I want to urge the council to approve this subdivision. We need more housing in Missoula. This subdivision is not out of character for that area. The people in Carter Court are just having NIMBY, and I don't blame them. Nobody wants more development next to them. But Carter Court was granted a bunch of variations from what I can see, and yet they're complaining that somebody else is going to be granted variations. Not very fair. And as for, I'm a renter, and I'd love to have more available housing that maybe I could purchase. But even as a renter, I care about my community. And I don't appreciate the comment about renters aren't as good as homeowners. Thank you.
Thanks for your comments. I appreciate those. And I've got a couple folks with hands up who've already spoken, and our rules, we just go once around for public comment. There is additional opportunity. So you can call us and leave a voicemail, 552-6012. You can attend future meetings, and you can contact us in writing, but we just, our rules, just to be fair to everyone, we just go once around from a public standpoint. Back to council, I have Sandra and then Mirta.
I think that some of them public were sharing computers. So I'm not sure if Joe Beck, if it was her husband that was trying to raise his hand, but I just wanted to give them the opportunity.
Okay, and I appreciate that. So if that is the case, you're welcome to weigh in.
No, I really just wanted to add something else that I'd forgotten when I spoke earlier. So I guess I can't speak right now. Thank you though, Sandra, for thinking of that.
Okay, thank you. So Sandra, did you have anything else to add?
I did not. Thank you though.
Okay. Mirta?
Yeah, I feel like I want to even further clarify the River Road right-of-way issue, if we could please. What is there right now is 60 feet of right-of-way. Whatever the improvements are right now, that's different. But in terms of how wide the road could actually be without taking away from people who already own property there is 60 feet, correct? Not 80. 80 is what's required now per our subdivision regulations. But as it stands right now, the road doesn't meet that requirement. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, so the variance is not asking for something that, the variance is just asking to meet what's currently on the ground. If the city at some point wanted to implement the new subdivision regulations, that would require, I don't know, eminent domain, taking an extra 20 feet of private property right now. Is that right?
Right, so most of what I could at least find for platted River Road is currently a 60-foot wide right-of-way. And so it is determined to be an urban collector. And so per our regulations, the urban collectors need to be 80 feet. And so existing it is 60. And essentially that's from the center line. So 40 feet from the center line of River Road to one end and 40 feet from the other for 80 total. So it would have had to been a 10-foot dedicated right-of-way on this property because it's currently 30 feet from the center line, and it would have been added 10 feet to get the 40. And so the variance is to not have to dedicate that additional right-of-way here and stick with the existing 60-foot wide right-of-way.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thanks. So we're scheduled until 2:45, so we're out of time, and I want to respect everyone's time. This is one other thing for our new members. Subdivisions are kind of a unique beast from a land use standpoint under state law, and we have a statutory timeline under which we have to approve or deny, under which we have to take action on the subdivision. And so we are not going to be able to extend this beyond March 14th. So if you do have questions that will influence your decision one way or another, please get them in by email to me or to staff, and we can have an additional pre-public hearing next week, and then we have the public hearing and final consideration on March 14th. Alex?
Well, thank you. You did touch on that. I scheduled in a tentative additional LUP pre-public hearing for next Wednesday on the 9th as a as-needed basis. So I don't know how that, I've never done two before a public hearing, so I don't know how that works. I guess it's still there as a placeholder, and if it's needed, we can use that platform as well.
Okay, and I think it's wise, just since we, subdivisions are, I think it's wise to just be cautious and have the time scheduled, and maybe I'll work with the clerk's office to just maybe get that scheduled at the end of the day, and then if we have extra time that we don't need, that's fine. But I'll work on schedule and communicate that out to everyone. And okay, well, we're out of time. So again, no action today, but thanks, a lot of good questions, and thanks everyone for coming to provide comment. And we will be adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you.